So a commenter, Ryan, asked, why do you have so many unidentified items? Well, Hey everyone, welcome, or for the elite few, welcome back to my channel. I am the free-to-play Crusader, but I don't just call myself that because I am a free-to-play Crusader, but actually because I am on a crusade to make this game more accessible and fun for free-to-play and casual players, explaining ways to get the most out of the game and min-max your efforts so that you can be competitive with people who have put money into the game. So if that interests you, please consider subscribing. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to be doing this, where I'm here in this general region of the screen for all my videos, but that's mainly because I wasn't sure how exactly to do it because I play Diablo Immortal on my phone, but this is being done via PC. Now you would think a computer science major would be able to figure this out, right? But you'd be wrong. But seriously, the IT majors deal with hardware and setting up systems like this. Computer science is, for the most part, writing software.
Now get it right or pay the price!
Now, another question you might have is, oh, why don't you just play on your PC? And that's because my PC is a laptop for one, so you know it's already not as good as a desktop for the most part. And it's like a mid-range gaming laptop from like 5 years ago. So I think it could probably run Diablo Immortal, but I would probably have to turn down some graphics settings. And meanwhile, my phone can run it perfectly with all of the settings turned all the way up. Plus, I've just gotten used to playing on the phone, so I don't feel like transitioning to PC and having to relearn everything using a mouse. I mean, what even is this? Now, on to the point of this video. A commenter asked a question, and I figured it'd be a good topic for a video, and one that I'd be able to do pretty quick, you know, put together in like 1 or 2 weeks. No, but seriously, hopefully I get it together today. So a commenter, Ryan, asked, why do you have so many unidentified items? Well, why do you ask so many damn questions? Now, the answer to that is something that I've mentioned in videos before, but I figured it could use its own video because it's actually something that can really benefit you as free-to-play or casual players. And of course, pay-to-win players can do this too, but you guys don't need the help. Get out of here. So, you want the answer? Let's take a look. So, the short answer is, as free-to-play and casual, and meaning you're generally weaker, at least compared to pay-to-win players, you gotta look for every possible way to min-max and make yourself stronger. Now, one way I do that, and potentially the most beneficial, is by keeping different sets of gear. So, in my PvP build here, I have my PvP gear. In my boss buffs and farming build, I have all of my highest combat rating gear, no matter what stats or magic is on it. Whatever's the highest combat rating goes in those 2 builds. And then the third set of gear is boss DPS and Shadow War builds, where I'm trying to do as much damage as possible. For these builds, I'm also keeping my highest damage gear. So, why do I have so many unidentified items? Because I keep 3 different sets of gear, which gets very messy, and which means that every time I identify a new piece of gear, I have to look through 3 different sets of gear to see if it needs to replace what's there. So it's pretty annoying and gets very messy. I'm actually doing pretty well right now. I had a big identify session, so my bag here was pretty full of unidentified items. Is probably what the commenter saw in one of my previous videos. But I did all that, and now I've started, if you look, I've started a new collection of unidentified items here. So if you're going to do what I'm talking about and keep different sets of gear, then like I said, every time you have a new piece of gear, it becomes annoying to look through all your different sets of gear and see if it needs to replace what's there. So I tend to gather up a ton of unidentified gear, and then when I have time, I identify it all at once, and then go through all of my builds to see if it needs to replace what's there. So at most times I have a bunch of unidentified gear. Now I know this isn't ideal, but if you're like me, casual, don't have a ton of time to put into it, and if you are going to keep multiple sets of gear, then you're probably going to end up doing this too because it just ends up being more efficient to do a bunch at once, and also because the process of going through all your gear sets to see what needs to be replaced is pretty annoying. But The reason that I thought this could make its own video is because this is one of the best ways to give yourself a boost, in general for any player, but for free-to-play and casual players, it matters a whole lot more. So just to show you how much of a difference it can make, let's put on my PvP build here, which is really my battleground build. So let's take a look at my stats here. Now, as I've said before, with PvP, as free-to-play and casual, it's very hard to compete. And I find that survival is the biggest issue, and maybe with certain other classes that are, ranged and more damage-oriented, this might not apply, but at least as melee, and at least in my situation and my playstyle, I'm aiming to increase my life as much as possible, even more than damage. Now, in general, in PvP, you want to boost your damage and life, those two things, as much as you can. But personally for me in PvP, in my situation, and I think for probably other melee classes as well, if you're free to play casual, you want to focus more on survival than damage. So again, I'm boosting damage and life as much as I can, but always focusing on life over damage when I have the choice. So look at these stats here. About 10.9k damage, 160k life, 12.7k combat rating. And that's something to also pay attention to here, not just the damage and life, because combat rating really doesn't matter that much in PvP, and I'll tell you why. If you look at combat rating, so this is comparing it to monsters at my difficulty, and because my combat rating is so much higher above theirs, it's increasing the damage I deal by 11% and decreasing the damage I take by 10%. And the same will go for players when it compares your combat rating to theirs. However, when you're up against a whale or even a dolphin, chances are they have way more combat rating than you, and the boosts that you get from combat rating, it has a cap, which so combat rating is really not that important for PvP, especially free-to-play and casual players. It's not something you should focus on because boosting your damage and life is way more important. So, 10.9k damage, 160k life, 12.7k combat rating. Now, the biggest contrast
from a certain point of view
is between my PvP gear and then my highest combat rating gear, which would be in this build. So now let's look at this build, where I'm only focusing on increasing combat rating as much as possible. So you can see it's about 300 less damage, about 6k less life, but a lot more combat rating, about 600 if I remember correctly what the previous build was. So this build is whatever gear I have that has the highest combat rating. Then for this build and this build, I want to do the most damage possible. So let's take a look at that. Now if you look here, look at that big difference. Combat rating is about the same as what my PvP build is, and in this set of gear I'm not focusing on combat rating, just focusing on damage. So this is about 600 combat rating less than my highest combat rating gear. And if you look at the life, it's about 20,000 less than my PvP build. And then if you look at the damage, again, the set of gear that I use for this build is whichever gear does the most damage. So this is almost 1,000 more damage than what I get with my highest combat rating gear. So, as you can see, it can make quite a big difference using different sets of gear. So for my set of gear that does the most damage, it's typically anything with a double stat of strength, because if it has a triple stat, it's going to be less strength than it would if it has a double stat. And then item base damage is a nice boost to your damage. And same with the set items, anything with strength on it, double stat, whatever is going to do the most damage. And if you're not sure between two pieces of gear, check what your damage and life are, then change to the other piece of gear and check what they are again. And the general rule of thumb is that 10 damage is equal to 100 life. So if you put on a piece of gear and you lose 10 damage but you gain 100 life, you can consider that pretty much a wash. It's an even trade. So there's not really any advantage there, except in cases like where you're trying to boost one of those two things specifically, like for me in my PvP gear, trying to boost my life, I would take the item that gave me the 100 life over the item that gave me the 10 damage. So just try on the different pieces of gear, see how it affects your damage. And then of less importance, you might want to consider which set items you're using. For instance, in my highest damage builds here, I want that at least 2-piece Grace. At times I've had it up to 4, because most of the damage you do as a Crusader is that type of continual damage, so this will give it a boost. And even though I might have a slightly lower damage number here than I would if I replaced my 2 Grace pieces with other pieces that I probably have that have more strength on them, the 15% damage boost is worth more. So that's also something to take into account. And another example of this is in my PvP set. And as I've said, as free-to-play and casual, generally weaker players, I think survival is a much bigger issue than dealing damage. So personally, I feel like I must have a 4-piece Mountebanks. The shield it gives you is such a huge benefit for survival. So again, even though I could replace the 4 Mountebanks items I have here probably with other items that might give me more life or damage, the effect of this set is so important that I make sure to have that in there. So there's the answer to why I have so many unidentified items. It's because I keep 3 different sets of gear, and it's a huge help. And I think if you're going to keep different sets of gear, maybe you don't need that 3rd highest damage set. Maybe just do your highest combat rating and then your PvP set, which is whatever gives you the most life and damage. And between the two, you might want to pick one to focus on life or damage. In my case, as I've said, I'm focusing on life. But if you don't mind the annoyance of the inventory management that you have to deal with, or you have a little more time to put into it, then I would recommend keeping different sets of gear, as once again, it is a huge boost and potentially the biggest one that you can give yourself as free-to-play and casual. So I recommend keeping different sets, as annoying as it is, and if you do and you're casual, you're going to end up like me probably and have lots of unidentified items. So yeah, if you have questions, video requests, love, hate, whatever, leave a comment. If you enjoyed that, learned something, appreciate the work I put in, or want to support me, use your primary attack on that like button. And if you want to see more Diablo Immortal content explaining how to get the most out of the game, and sometimes short, funny videos or Crusader builds, subscribe. And if you're going to subscribe, you might as well hit that bell, because I don't put videos out very often, at least not at this point, so I'm not going to be blowing up your feed, alright? Just hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.